Preparing for Azure AD Connect. Hey everyone, Ben Finkel here. In this nugget, we're going to talk about the ways that you can synchronize or copy your users from an on-premise Active Directory service into Office 365. The primary tool that you're going to use to do this is called Azure Active Directory Connect, or AAD Connect. It's an age-old question they've been asking since the dawn of man. Do I synchronize or do I federate? Okay, maybe they haven't quite been asking it for that long, and actually you may not know exactly what I'm talking about. But what we're talking about is we are talking about connecting our local on-premise Active Directory accounts to Office 365. Right? Not all of us are going to run exclusively in Office 365. In fact, a lot of companies already have a well-established on-premise Active Directory service. That's where their user accounts are. And if they're going to start using Office 365, well, how do you get those user accounts into Office 365? Obviously, you can have administrators who manually key in one by one each of those users, and every time there's a new hire, they enter those users into both places, and every time someone moves organizations or leaves the company, you can delete them from both places, and yeah, right? That already sounds like a ton of work, and really a good excuse to cause problems. Well, thankfully, Microsoft is ahead of the game on this, and they have a number of different ways that you can use your on-premise Active Directory with Office 365. And there's going to be two basic methodologies for doing that. It's either synchronization or federation. Now, federation is simply forwarding any authentication requests that come in to Office 365 down to your on-premise Active Directory service. Nothing happens in Office 365 more than sort of a forwarding of these accounts. And we're going to talk about how you can set that up with something called AD Federation services in a different nugget in this series. What we're talking about today is we're talking about synchronization. Synchronization is the actual copying of your user accounts from your on-premise Active Directory up into Office 365. Synchronization literally makes duplicates of all of those accounts, including their attributes, at least some of their attributes, and their passwords and things like that, so that you don't have to do that work for you. And using the tool that we're going to talk about, Azure AD Connect, it's going to ensure that it maintains or remains synchronized even as you perform different activities in your on-premise Active Directory. So you only do the things that you need to do to administer your service once on-premise, and those changes are synchronized or rolled up into Office 365 for you. In this nugget, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the features of Azure Active Directory Connect and how you can prepare and set up your account for it. First, let's talk a little bit about the history of synchronization between Azure Active Directory, or on-premise Active Directory, and Azure Active Directory, which is the directory that is behind Office 365. The very first tool that Microsoft supplied to do this was called DirSync, D-I-R-S-Y-N-C. And DirSync was really simple, really easy to use and set up. It was great, but it wasn't very feature-rich. It didn't do a lot of the things or handle a lot of the unique situations that people run into when they're running a production Active Directory on their premise. That was replaced with something called Azure Active Directory Sync. AAD Sync. And AAD Sync was very short-lived. It didn't stick around a long time. You won't hear much about it because that was very quickly replaced with Azure Active Directory Connect, or AAD Connect. And the thing about Azure Active Directory Connect is that it is the most feature-rich and arguably the easiest to use of all the tools that they've supplied. It's the one that you're going to find on the 70-346 exam, and it's the one that you should be using in your environment, in your system, if you are setting up synchronization. What does Azure Active Directory Connect do for you? Well, it allows for multiple on-premise forests. So if you have more than one forest in your on-premise Active Directory account, which is essentially saying if you have more than one Active Directory installation almost, AD Connect can handle that. The older tools, the sync tools, cannot handle that. Azure AD Connect will handle that well. Another cool thing that Azure AD Connect does is it handles write-back for users, groups, and passwords. Write-back is, just like it sounds like, it's writing data back from Office 365 into your on-premise Azure directory. Now, just a moment ago, I talked about how we want a single place to manage. We want to be able to write all our changes in one place and have those changes propagate up so that they are seamless and synchronized between the two systems. Well, unfortunately, that's not the way reality works. For instance, let's imagine if you have password reset self-service enabled for your users in Office 365. A user comes along and resets their password in Office 365. Well, now their password is different between the on-premise Active Directory and Office 365. If the user doesn't go to the on-premise Active Directory and perform that exact same reset function, guess what? That password is going to get wiped out when the synchronization next occurs. When you have password write-back enabled, when the user performs that operation, Office 365 will write back the password into the on-premise Active Directory, and they will remain synchronized. And you can do the same thing for users and groups as well with Azure AD Connect, so that you can ensure that you're writing back those changes from Office 365 into your on-premise directory. Azure AD Connect also allows you to filter by object attribute. So when you synchronize users up into the cloud, you might not want to synchronize every single user. In fact, you probably don't. You probably want to filter down those users in some way, and you can actually filter not only on attribute, but you can also filter on domain and organizational units. So this is important when it comes to deciding how you want to construct the filter for your users. You can limit to just a single domain. You can say, you know what, I only want domain X from my on-premise directory to get synchronized up. You can filter by organizational units, so you can, however your OUs are defined inside of your structure, and you can use, like I just said, attributes to ensure that only users with particular attributes that also meet the other criteria get synchronized. So finally, how do we prepare our Active Directory for AD Connect? Well, we need to ensure a couple of really key critical features are set up properly in our on-premise Active Directory. First, a set of attributes that have to have valid characters in them, and they are the attributes that are going to get copied up into Office 365, your SAM account name, your display name, your given name. These are the things that get populated in your account in Office 365, and they have to have these valid characters. What are valid characters? Letters, numbers, periods, dashes, and underscores. So no exclamation points in the display name, no ats in the given name. You got to stick to the valid characters if the synchronization is going to work. Another really critical validation that you have to make sure is set up properly in your on-premise Active Directory is a valid UPN. And a valid UPN can be routed to by a public DNS server, and that is something like, for instance, cbtnuggets.com. That is a publicly routable domain name. A lot of on-premise Active Directories don't use .com. They try to separate their on-premise Active Directory from a publicly routable address, and they'll use something like cbtnuggets.local as an example. That's not valid. You can't use a .local address, and if your users have that as their UPN name in Active Directory, well, you've got to update it to a publicly routable domain name. Thankfully, Office 365 gives us one of those, the .onmicrosoft.com domain. I'm going to show you in 1 second how you can set that up so that it works properly. If you're concerned about searching through your Active Directory for all of these problems, don't worry. Microsoft has supplied us with the ID Fix tool. You can find it at this URL right here. ID Fix will scan your Active Directory, and it will flag or notify you, report to you, any problems, any invalid entries in your Active Directory that will have difficulty synchronizing to Azure AD Connect. Let's finish up by taking a look at an Active Directory server and seeing how we can deal particularly with these invalid UPN names. But I also like to run this ID Fix tool and show you how that works. So I'm here on a server, and the first thing that I'd like to do, I'll fire up users and computers here, and we can see that my domain name, my users are all set to log in as test user at cbtnuggets.local. Yeah, that's no good. We can't have that happen. And another way that I could see that, if I bring up my my downloads here, I have the ID Fix tool downloaded on this machine, and if I give that a run, it's a very simple little tool. You can see it starts with this blank screen. If I run query, it's going to tell me the same thing. I've got these 4 users who have an error of their top level domain. cbtnuggets.local is no good. I can't do that. So here's what I want to do. I need to create a different UPN that those users can use to log in as, and I'm going to do that right under my tools under Active Directory Domains and Trusts. These are all standard Active Directory tools for working with local on-premise Active Directories. If you're not familiar with this stuff, I'd recommend you check out maybe our Windows Server courses by James Conrad and Garth Schulte. They have a lot of really in-depth detail on how to run with Active Directory. Now I'm going to right-click the Active Directory Domains and Trusts and choose Properties here, and really the only property that I can do with is add alternate UPN suffixes. Perfect. So I could add, well, you know what, cbtoffice.com. That is a top-level domain that we have inside of our portal. I can click add that to the alternate UPN suffixes, and now that's available. That's all I need to do in Domains and Trusts. The second thing I need to do is I need to update each of the users to use that. So if I come here to test user Q1, come to the account, I can now pull down that domain name here. So now I'm updating the UPN name for test user 1. Click apply. Say OK. I'm actually going to launch ID Fix again. Query it, and look, now we only have 3 users that are invalid. So I've already cleaned up one of these users from ID Fix. which means I only have 3 more users to go. Now, if you want to do this user by user, that's fine, but chances are you've got a ton of users to go through. You need to find some batch way to do this, and the batch process for doing this is with Windows PowerShell. I've got my Windows PowerShell ISE up here. I'm going to paste in a very simple script that will iterate through the users who have cbtnuggets.local as their UPN, and it will update it. It'll change it to cbtoffice.com. Just to talk you through how this script works very quickly, we call the get80user commandlet, and we filter out for user principal name like cbtnuggets.local. So we're only getting the users who have a user principal name of cbtnuggets.local. Then I for each through the results of that. You can see here I pipe it into the for each statement. And in the for each statement, I update the UPN, and I call the set80user commandlet to actually change their UPN to cbtoffice.com. So if we go ahead and run this command right here, it should just take a moment to update those 3 users. And now let's rerun our ID fix. Boom, we're all set. Cleaned all those errors up. So now my directory is prepared to be synchronized up into Office 365.